Hey y'all, it's time for cards in Maya. A very tedious process, but it creates a pretty amazing result, I think. In my opinion. So, um, all cards will start. Oh, this is so embarrassing. All cards will start. Let's start with the branches because I guess they're a little easier to see. But the main thing that drives cards is an opacity map, and that one is a little crunchy. So I'll show you this one. You'll see it's pretty much the silhouette of a leaf. That's because it is a leaf. And it has the color map, a normal map, opacity map, and roughness. Which, I mean, we're all pretty much familiar with right now, but something important comes into play when making cards down the line, especially for things like branches and things that aren't scattered throughout the wind kind of thing. Stuff that's like anchored onto something. So for example, I've got Tessa's lovely tree here. It's very beautiful. But the thing is that if we instance this everywhere, things are gonna get a little dicey. Right now we're already at 63,000 faces, which is 12,000 tries. So the thing is, like, we have a bunch of trees in our film, so if we start going duplicate and duplicate everywhere, things will start to get crazy unoptimized, and the cards are going to help us turn something like this into this, but with a bunch of planes on it. And for this example, I'm using more realistic leaves. Obviously, we're going to be using more stylized stuff, which will save us time anyways. No normal maps, no nothing. So let's just get right into it. So you'll notice on these, we've got leaves. Very beautiful, very powerful. And we'll take a look at their opacity map. So if I bring this bad guy, I draw on you here. Alright, I'm drawing on him in here, because paint is bad. So when we're making cards for something like this, we're going to want to make sure that our UV map of whatever square we have fits around it, giving it a little bit of distance on each side, depending on what you're going for, but just something to make it so that way the entire object isn't using the whole square or anything like that. But once we have it outlined around the object, that's when we can go in and add certain subdivisions, like maybe this cleaf is really close and we want to make it a little bit more like this from the side view. You know what I mean? Just giving it a little bit of depth and times that it really needs it. But for now, I'm going to pop back over to the branches. And for example, let's just take this one. So the UV map for this one, for the card, is going to look a little bit like this, where the bottom of it is going to chop off just a little bit past this little area here, just to give us a little wiggle room. And so when we're placing this on the tree, imagine this is the branch. Blah 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 blah. Something that you'll start to notice is that the direction that your planes are facing on the object are very important. So for example, if this is my UV map, and I got this cut out on my card, I'm going to want to make sure that this bottom edge is resting on top of the branch. Because, for example, if I didn't do that, it would end up being mirrored, and then the branch is up here, and the image is upside down, and it's like, oh no. And then you have to go back in and fix that, which is kind of painful. So, right now, we're just going to pop back into Maya. I'm going to give this bad guy a little material. Let's just throw a stand surface on him. And I'll name you... Let's start with the branches. Branches material. So I'm going to go back into the hypershade. Let's bring up my material. And let's just start plugging these bad boys in. Drag and drop. This part is a little tedious, but things will start to connect. And okay, let's get our color plugged in. Let's get our roughness. Yes, specular roughness. Turn him to raw. Alpha is luminance. Opacity, raw. Alright, let's turn this color into opacity, because it's going to take the color from here instead of the alpha. Same for the normal map. Let's go 2D. Tangent space normals. I honestly forget which one to use. I think it's alpha, I hope? And then we just turn this to raw and not alpha is luminance. So, now that we've got everything plugged into our material, we should be able to look at this guy and say, hello. Alright, so we got him here, but the problem that we're facing now is, hey, your opacity map isn't working. What is happening here? So we're going to have to go to Renderer, Viewport 2.0, and then we'll go to Alpha Cut, Transparency Algorithm Alpha Cut. And you can turn up the quality. I personally don't notice a huge difference in it, but if you notice that you have a bunch of cards and things are starting to slow down, maybe you can pop in here, select, make sure everything's good. So now, this guy is transparent, and you can see his sun behind him. But, yeah. So now let's pop into his UVs and see what's going on. Okay, let's take a look at his UVs. Let's see what's going on here. So, actually, let me also turn down his polygons, because the whole point is that he's super optimized and ready to go. So let's grab his shell. You notice that we make it smaller, you know, it's starting to take shape. These are very low quality, I'm going to be so honest with you. These are from an old project, so, you know what, I kind of vibe with this one. This one's having a good vibe. So we're going to take the vertices of our object here. Let's just try and get it lined up pretty good. And these in here start to take form. You know, everyone can have a little bit different moment to it, you know, just to get some variation in each one. But for now, this seems okay. So now that we have our card set up and ready to go, we have object mode, we can see it, we can move it around. You can see he's got the opacity map going for him. Now, we want to make sure that all the transforms and stuff, 0, delete history, and the pivot point, specifically for these guys, is going to go at the very bottom of the card. I like to leave a little bit of room here just in case there's like a rotation that ends up tweaking it a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and move this guy down here. I think that'll give me enough clearance. Like for example, if this line of the grid is going to be where I'm placing the branch, it gives me about that much wiggle room to rotate him around, you know? Alright, so let's bring this bad boy onto the 0, 0 grid. And then we can start to rotate him back. Now he looks very proper. Proper fellow. I'm going to recenter my pivot again, just so I make sure I get everything good. I'm going to bring it back down to the grid. And for snapping to the grid, I'm just holding down X. You can also see up here, you can toggle things on and off. Things like curves, points, all that good stuff. And I'm pressing D to change the pivot as well. So I have a card. And now I have a branch, and he is in need of some branches. For the sake of this, I'm just going to make him bigger. So now, I won't get into mesh for right now, but in terms of placing him on here, you know, it's just wherever you need a branch. He needs a friend. Just for the sake of the example, I'm just going to throw him around on here. Nothing too serious. And also, if you wanted to make sure you could also see it on the back, you could go to lighting, two-sided lighting, and things will start to go good. Should also render like that. I hope so. Yes, I believe so. Like this card for example is giving me a problem here because this leaf is really close and starts to clip back in this guy. So when making the cards, it's pretty important to just make sure that you get a good base of them before you start placing them, because it becomes a huge headache when you're trying to place stuff and it's just like, what's going on here? Alright. And this one is pretty extremely flat. Personally, I would try and make the branch one card and then maybe add the leaves separate if I knew this was going to be something really close to the camera. If this was that close to the camera, I might end up actually just modeling them, but just for the sake of showing how the cards work, it's important to know that you have to have your opacity map, your UV has to be squared around it, and try and avoid distortion and stuff like that, but, goodness gracious. You can see a little bit of red there, just from a little bit of smushing it. And then also, making sure you have enough clearance and that your pivot is set in the right place. Things like mesh are going to help make this process a lot easier when it comes to stuff like foliage and stuff, all that goodness. But yeah, and also one of the biggest headaches that I run into is just clearance and making sure that things have enough room to wiggle. You can wiggle all this way over here, but then I get over there and it's like, he's starting to squish his friend. I don't like that. Also, you can place these any angle you want. Just try and be mindful of the camera as much as you can. Alright. So we've got this branch here, and I'm just going to hide it for now. I'm going to start with the leaves. And I'll show you a little bit about how you can make cards have depth and all that good stuff. And we might pop a little bit into mesh, just because it's really fun and really useful. So for this one, I'm going to make a leaf. But I'm going to start it from the beginning. Let's assign it a new material, and you can skip to the part of the video where I finish all this if you feel comfortable, but just as a backup, let's graph this bad boy. Let's name him Leaves. Or actually, he'll just be a leaf for now. Leaf material. Let's graph this bad boy, just make sure everything's updated. Now let me go to card demo, source images, leaves. Now bring these all in. Alright. The process that we are very familiar with and very pained with. The struggle. A funny story about these images here is that I actually went out and I took pictures of leaves. It was for just a little personal project. Having fun. Let's get the bump to D. Let's get tangent space normals. I think it's alpha. I hope so. I'll have to double check the image at some point. I got raw, alpha, it's off. I think should be good. You can also see it up here. It's kind of creepy when you have really detailed normal maps. It's like I could reach in there and pick up the leaf. Alright. I'm gonna go into my UV editor. Trying to see which leaf I vibe with. Okay, you know, this one like seems extremely perfect, so I'll just go ahead and use that one. Going into my UV shell, shrink this bad boy. It also helps in general if you know the general shape of the leaf you're gonna use, or object that you're gonna use. You can squish this and then unfold it, and it'll give you an easier way to just pop in there and rotate things around. Maybe squish it just a little bit. Let's see, for this guy, I actually want to get his... Well, since he's going to be a leaf that's floating off the distance, I'll make sure he has all of his, a little bit of clearance on every side too. Pretty much just eyeballing it here, but... So, now that we got our leaf looking good, let's just leave the UV editor for now. So I got a leaf, right? And I'm thinking, if this guy is floating through the wind, maybe he's got a little bit of curve to him. So I'll go ahead, make sure I delete my history and all that good stuff. I should name it. Let's just name him Leaf. Very awesome. And for cards, you know, we're trying to optimize things, right? So as long as we can get away with something pretty intentional, you know, what is that saying? Like, every edge has its purpose. What is every edge's purpose in this card here? So for example, the last one we did, the branch was probably something that was very far away from the camera, right? So we could get away with this kind of flat moment. I might add a division in the middle too. But for this one, let's say this one might end up getting a little bit closer to the camera, so just gonna grab these guys and pull them down. And you can start adding dimension to something flat. It's very creepy, but also fun. You'll also notice you'll get a bit of like UV distortion and tearing and scrunchiness if you go a little too far with this. That's so creepy. If you know you're putting smooth preview on it, you could probably get away with one less division in the middle, but just for extra control and stuff. For the sake of this, I'll leave smooth division on just because I think it looks pretty awesome. Alright. So we got our other card here. Now the most important thing here, bring him back up. He must return to the center. I'm gonna give him a little bit of clearance just because he is flat here. I'll show you. If we go down just a little too much, you can see the floor through him. I don't like that. So I'm gonna give a little bit of clearance just in case he wants to rotate and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna delete that. Actually, I'm gonna keep that floor plane so I can see things going on in our scene. Go ahead and delete all the history, censor the pivot. Doesn't really matter if you center the pivot or not, but now I gotta bring him down to the grid. You can get away with a different kind of pivot if it's a leaf flying in the distance, but our very awesome leaf, he will now be instanced. So let's pop into our effects tab. Let's go to Mesh. Create Mesh Network. However, for the sake of showing different things in Mesh, I'm going to go ahead and make a couple other leaves. So I'm going to do that really quick and come back. So I got 6 leaves in total here. You can see I've kind of just duplicated the first leaf and changed his UV around there. Let's make sure these are a smooth preview. They're kind of clipping into each other just because I got them all shown at once. I'll just hide them, leave this one here for now. And I also wanted to double check that I'm not clipping through the bottom at all. So let me just hide this one. Check this one out. Check this one out. Check this one out. They're all looking good to me. So I'm going to make sure I hide that plane again. Let's bring back all our leaves this time. Go ahead and add just a little bit of variation. You know we love that. Smoothness. Smooth variation. Let's hide this guy. Critics. I'm just having fun here. Wow. So much craziness going on here. Throw this one all the way up. All the way down. Making sure the bottom doesn't clip. This is just for fun, but it always is good to have a little bit of variation, especially on stuff that has this kind of bend to it. Oopsies, my bad. I've hidden half of you, Leaf. My bad. Bring him back. And just keep playing with this for now. Alright, let's go ahead and unhide these bad boys. I'll bring you up here because you're upsetting me. Deleting the history. I'm not centering the pivot because I want to keep them all at the same spot in the origin. Everything's looking good. Let's make a little elevation for these bad boys to go on. Beautiful. So now I'm going to select all of these leaves. I'm going to go to Effects. I'm going to go to Mesh. One thing about Mesh though is that I want all these leaves to be instanced everywhere, so I'm making sure that they're all selected. I'm making sure that their pivots are in the origin, and I'm making sure that they're above the pivot, or above the origin, because I want them to show up above the floor, not below the floor, anywhere I place them. So that's just a good thing to note, in that anytime you're instancing something in Mesh, it's pretty much always a good idea to keep it at the origin of the scene. Creating Mesh Network. What happened? All my leaves got spread out. They're lining up perfectly so we can check them out. I'm kidding. So this is the Mesh node. And so basically, all of your technical prowess comes to life in the Mesh node in the attribute editor. So we have, for example, a bunch of tabs here. Let's just go through them and see what they got. So I got the Mesh, like Mesh 1 node, or whatever you're naming your Mesh network. It's going to have a bunch of different nodes that you can add to your network that all have a bunch of different a bunch of different like processes that they do to your system of nodes, and they work in layers. So anything you do to one and then you add a node to it, it's going to affect the previous result of the one that you just did. So today we're going to go over the placer one just for now. But also, you'll notice that we have mesh ID. This is because we have imported, well, we've started an instance more than one thing here. So it says we have 6. It's very interesting. We want to make sure we set that to random. So it's, whenever we instance something, it's going to pick a random leaf. Very cool, very cool. You can see if we change the seed, it changes out our leaves for random ones. This is like very lucky. Kidding. It's actually very, very lucky. That's so crazy. I'll just leave it at this for now. Doesn't really matter. Time, I won't mess with that right now. That is a headache and a half. Distribute, you'll notice that we have 6 points here, and we got 6 of our leaves out here. Whoa, what's going on here? If you wanted to line stuff up, instance them in a line, I mean, you could go with this. You could put it on top of a mesh, instance things on top of the surface of a mesh. Put it in a sphere. Very, very funny stuff you can do here. But for now, I'm going to put it back to linear and I'm going to set it to 0. The reason why I'm setting it to 0 is because I wanted to use my placer node to put them, slap them all over here. So now I got my plane, whatever, delete my history, all that good stuff. Probably would rename it if this was something serious. And now I'm going to go back to, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to go to the placer. Let's add this placer node. And now you can see we've got a whole bunch of tools at our disposal. We got add, delete, collide, nudge, and ID. For now we're just going to talk about add, delete, and also maybe collide just for posterity, I guess. It's a good tool that helps things will, you know, not collide. Alright, before we start slapping our things everywhere, you'll notice that if we do start to slap things everywhere, it's just one leaf. What the heck is going on here? So, we've got mesh ID, right? Placer by default is just supposed to work with one, I guess, instanced type of object per time, per network. But there's a little thing here. We can go ID mode. It says fixed right now, and it says paint ID 0. Since the computer is counting from 0 to 5, while we have 1 through 6, it's counting the first one as 0 and the last one as 5. Well, in here, I named it 1 through 6. It's going 0 to 5 because computers are evil. But it's saying, okay, ID mode fixed, paint ID 0. So it's taking 0, which is leaf very awesome 1. I want to change that and just go to random. And I've got randomize 0, 0, random ID 0 to 0. So it's saying I'm going to only pick through this range of IDs, which is 0 to 0. So it's still only going to be that one. So we're just going to change this to 5. And you'll notice that it brings in all of our very awesome leaves. So we've got very awesome leaf 1 through 6 on our outliner. But the computer is like, I'm going to start at 0. So it's going 0 to 5. Now that we've got our random ID mode, so we can bring in all of our friends, there's a bunch of different settings here. And I'm not going to lie, a lot of experimentation is open here. It's just very fun, I think. You know, you've got scatter, which puts a bunch of things at a time instead of just one leaf at a time. You know, we've got brush spacing, the difference spacing between your brush. How much distance can you travel before another leaf is created, or anything is created? You know, I turned it up to 5 earlier and it wasn't really going, but now I'm turning it to 0.3 and it's like, you have a leaf and you have a leaf. If you check under your chair, there's a leaf. And also, if you noticed, every time I'm changing the brush settings, I'm double clicking add, because there are some types of like little glitches, and also I just wanted to make sure that I'm updating my brush. It might have gotten fixed in a recent version of Maya, but at least when I was messing with the tree stuff a while back, I would have to double click add every single time I changed any of the settings. So if you notice, maybe I'm changing something but nothing's happening. Like my brush radius is at 0, but then I change it to 1,000,000. Okay, it's working magically now, that's so funny. Okay. But you know, delete is deleting things in the radius of your brush. And when we go ahead and let's just slap a bunch of, let's just put so many leaves in here. We can also try out the collide brush. So it's like, actually you are in another leaf, so I'm gonna move you. So it's gonna try and move things away from each other. This can end up with some really weird stuff, so it's pretty much just best to keep things clean as you go instead of relying on the collide brush. But yeah, there's also a bunch of different settings, you know. Random scale, 1 through, let's say 1.5. And also random rotation. It's going to be X, Y, and Z because there's 3 values here. Let's say rotate it randomly on this Y axis 180. So it'll pick a random number 0 through 180. And it's just placing them whatever you want. Let me just delete all these guys. And you'll see sometimes the first placement of your brush will always be like very much so not aligning with the normals. This is just a thing. I'm not sure how to fix it. But every single brush stroke after that is pretty good, right? Except for the first one. You'll also notice this push along normal. So what it's going to do is that with the normal of the face here, it's going to push it out a certain distance. Which can be useful if you're getting some crunchy collisions like that. Yum. Helps just to know. Very cool. And there's also nudge. Maybe you want to lean it or just push it against the normal. You can also move. You can also just move everything with this. It's very powerful. For just some extra precision, in case you're just like, I don't want to undo everything, but I also really like how that one looks. Very silly. And of course we got that silly one in the beginning, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that guy. Let me turn down my brush radius. If you're having things that are hidden and they shouldn't be hidden, like for example my brush radius was just hidden because I had hit the move earlier, you can just go to another tab and come back. Usually it'll fix it. Delete him. Now we've got some leaves. Beautiful. The repro mesh is going to be the mesh output for your mesh network. So for example, you know, we select our node here, and it's not selecting our geometry. But this is going to be our geometry now. We've got all of our cards beautifully placed, however you'd like. So I'm going to select my mesh network. Well, actually, I'm going to select this. I'm going to try and move it. The evilness. You'll notice it will crash. Sometimes it will crash. Let's go ahead and open it again. No big deal. Alright, so what happened earlier is we tried to move vertices on the repro mesh. No go, no go. Sometimes it will crash, sometimes it will be evil. We don't know. However, what we do know is that there's 2 different types of ways that mesh can interpret your mesh outputs, I guess you would call them. So you've got repro mesh, and guess what? Utilities. Switch mesh geometry type. Well, sorry, I have to select the mesh node. So now it's an instancer. But what the heck is an instancer? What the heck is a repro mesh? Well, I won't get into that. However, instancer is each one instance. Booyah. And repro mesh gives you a little bit more freedom with mesh's controls, time, color, whatever. It's not really important right now. What is important is that we want these guys to be movable. So now that we've switched to instancer, we can go select our instancer, mesh, utilities, bake instancer to objects. Crazy! The default settings are good. We're not using animation, so we'll just do break this frame. Close that bad boy. We can hide our mesh network, delete it, whatever the heck you want. And now we have our instances of objects baked into little meshes for us to refine, fix, and all that good stuff. And you can move them without your computer exploding. It's pretty awesome. Oh yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope this is helpful, and I hope that you have a new tool in your arsenal. Alright, bye!